Okay, so I've always liked the idea of helping people, even in death. So what's to happen to our physical bodies other than being buried into the ground after we have passed? Um, so why not make the most of your physical being by becoming an organ donor and helping someone else's life and changing someone else's life? So today I'll be explaining to you why you should become an organ donor. So you should become an organ donor because first and foremost, you'd be changing someone's life. Um, that's one of the most selfless things that you can do for another human being, um, which is um, super rewarding, honestly, um, to be able to see someone thrive after a transplant. Um, Funeral costs would diminish or become very minimal, and you can be contributing to the saving of rural areas for the creations of more cemeteries. So people are always in need of transplants. According to the American Transplant Foundation, over 114,000 people are currently waiting for organ transplant. Um, Organs that can be donated um, after after death are the heart, liver, kidneys, lungs, pancreas, and small intestines. Um, a healthy person can become a living donor by donating their kidneys, their part of their liver, their lungs, their one lung, intestine, blood, and bone marrow, which is all super important, especially for blood transfusions in the case of a sudden illness or accident, and bone marrow, especially for leukemia patients. They really need bone marrow. Um, Tissues would include cornea, skin, veins, heart valves, tendons, ligaments, and bones. Um, and those are all very important as well to be able to transplant, to donate. Um, in the US, most people have funeral arrangements that consist of a burial or a cremation. According to LHLIC.com, the average funeral costs between $7,000 and $12,000 for a funeral home and casket arrangements, not including marker cemetery. Not including markers, cemetery plots, and flower arrangements, or anything else included in that funeral. Anything else that you would want to include in that funeral. The average cost for a cremation is $6,000 to $7,000. Those are huge numbers, even for a simple cremation. That's not including cremation urns, which can also be quite expensive, depending on what you get. I've seen the cheapest of $300, which is still a good chunk of change, even for the simplest of urns. Um, so, according to DonateLifeTexas.org, depending on which programs you sign up for, whether it's entire body donation or specified organ donation, some of these programs will use what they need, um, and whatever is remaining, they will cremate it back to your family for little to no cost. Um, so I believe that it is such a big perk because one, you will be helping people. Two, you will be minimizing funeral costs, and three, you'd be helping the planet and saving the environment from needless creations of more cemeteries and destroying these habitats for our wildlife. Um, so you can sign up on the website donatelifetexas.org to donate your entire body to science, or you can sign up to be an organ donor through your uh, local DMV through your driver's license application. It's super simple. It's super easy to apply to either of those. Um, and signing up for these programs allows for medical personnel to recover your organs in the case of a sudden illness or death, and they will recover it to save someone else's life. Um, so let's talk about the organ transplant process. According to NYP.org, These are steps taken. So if first they will, at or near the time of a person's death, they will contact the donor organization to make sure you are an eligible candidate for organ donation. Next, they will evaluate your medical history, your medical conditions. They will run a series of tests to make sure your organs are in good shape and in good health to be usable for organ transplant. Once that person is declared deceased, they will obtain the consent from the next of kin or the authorized party to be able to retrieve those organs. Afterwards, they will find recipients who are awaiting transplants through the waiting list UNOS, which stands for the United Network for Organ Sharing, and the donor's information will be put into the system and matched with people who are waiting for a transplant. If you look on their website, they describe what their waiting list consists of. So they have recipients information listed, which includes their blood type, medical conditions, their urgency for their transplant, the exact time they were entered into the system, and more information if needed. They even have people who have been removed from the waiting list due to a change in condition that would disqualify them from receiving the transplant. And they even have people who have unfortunately passed in the process of waiting for a transplant, which is why it's so important to sign up to become an organ donor. So things like that don't happen as often. But once they have matched you, the organ surgeon, the transplant surgeon will have the last say to make sure that they are an eligible match. Then comes the organ recovery procedure. Where they will retrieve the organs from the OR. The medical team will then transport those organs to the recipient at their facility where they will receive their transplant. So although it's a difficult decision and process, there are lots of people who have shared their stories on how organ donation has changed their lives, both donors and recipients alike. According to lifegift.org, they publish people's stories. And there's this one story, for example. Her name is Emily. Emily is a mother to a 17-year-old Cassie, who unfortunately passed away after a terrible car accident. But before Cassie had passed, she had signed up to be an organ donor. Because of this, she was able to save several people's lives, including a recipient. Her name was Sarah, and she needed a heart transplant. So they were able to give Cassie's heart to Sarah. And Emily, Cassie's mom, explains it as a joyful moment to be able to hear her daughter's heart within Sarah's body. So it is definitely making a world of a difference to lots of people. So in that case, please consider becoming an organ donor. You could be making a very big difference in people's lives.